to Cage Minds Uncensored. I'm your host, Micah Frankel. A shout out to Mac 10, Edwin Ruiz, supporting combat sports athletes, combat sports everywhere. Give them some support on Facebook, MMA CK10. And a shout out and a thank you for the hats, because I love my hats. I love the hats. Really, seriously, Edwin, thank you. Let's get started this week talking about MMA. Got 3 events that passed by this weekend with LFA, with Bellator, with the UFC. Of course, we had that huge head-to-head Saturday night, but the weekend gets started on Friday, and it did in Arizona. LFA 31. Some big takeaways from that one. Mario Batista, very slick, very accurate. Love his striking. Watch out for him as he continues to grow and develop. Corey Sandhagen came out with ferocity, with a mission, with vicious leg kicks, getting into the clinch, ripping down the head, a great knee to the face on Jose Aguayo, and finishing it off with some strikes. Corey Sandhagen has already gotten the call and will be taking Augustine Asset on in a short notice bout this Saturday in North Carolina, UFC on Fox 27. LFA, the feeder to the UFC, so a huge win for Corey Sandhagen. Then we get to the controversial fight. We had interviewed Roman Alcantar about making his LFA debut here at LFA 31, taking on Matthew Franku, the very technical striker. You had Franku, some vicious body kicks. Alcantar was not able to secure the takedowns. Franku was getting back up to his feet. Franku did get bloodied in the mouth, so you did see effective punches being landed from Alcantar before one of the most vicious low blows I've seen, I think, this side of Thiago Santos versus Eric Prindle from the first Bellator heavyweight title, or second Bellator heavyweight title crowning fight. Just a vicious low blow from Franku. Alcantar is down, and I mean down in a bad way, rolling around, coughing. Looks like he's about to puke. The referee is way too close. Let's just get it. Personal space. Way too close while Alcantar is coughing and his nuts have just been destroyed. The ref is right on top of Alcantar, reminding him continuously, if you puke, you will be disqualified. Now, I can understand from the referee's point of view that you need to inform the fighter. But once you've informed him once of it, every time the man goes to puke, you're just forcing someone to hold that in. Alcantar, with probably more guts, more heart than a lot of men, and more than he needs for getting back up, getting back into the fight. You could see that obviously the illegal blow had taken its toll, its effect. Alcantar was continually grabbing himself down there, adjusting. When you get hit that hard, it takes something out of you. Imagine you're playing a video game and you see that life bar. Even though that hit was illegal and doesn't count towards anything positive for the judges, it still took something away from that gas tank. Still took something away from the velocity of the punches that Alcantar would be throwing. As they're going on, Alcantar again gets hit with a body kick. He's circling away from the cage, and his left leg just dislocates and explodes. And I'd hate to actually, speculate on what it is, but an obvious knee injury from Alcantar. I will be talking with him this week to get an update. I talked with him prior to him seeing the doctor back here in Albuquerque, that he was back here in Albuquerque, and that he was most likely expecting to have surgery. So when I have that update for you guys, I will get that news out there of what the damage Roman Alcantar did suffer was. But with the knee injury, going down, screaming in pain, Matthew Franku gets the TKO win, and more heart than needed with that outside pressure from the referee. I don't think anybody could actually blame Alcantara. He would have got the win by disqualification, but I don't think you can say it's a cheap win if he would have done it, if he would have thrown up, if he would have called it quits after taking, again, a extra point up the middle to the Wevels. This was a ouch of a shot. Maybe it would have been called a no contest. Maybe it would have been a DQ, but it was a devastating, illegal foul landed by Franco. And in the end, I do believe that the effect of that foul was felt into how Alcantara played. And who knows, it could have actually hurt so bad. It could have affected how he was moving, leading to the knee injury. There were some leg kicks landed by Franco. Franco gets the win. Alcantara leaves with an injury. A bad sight to see. And it brings up the question, and if anybody hears this, get back to me on social media, at Cage Minds, MMA on Twitter, comment on the link, whatever. What would you have thought if Alcantara would have stayed down, if the fight would have been called from the low blow? What are your thoughts on a scenario in a situation like that? Does the fighter owe it to get back up to keep fighting? Because we know what they're thinking. I mean, I'll tell you, in the heat of the moment, the fighter is saying, I'm going to compete. As Alcantara was, I'm angry, I'm going to come back out throwing. Which actually, an interesting part, too, if you missed the fight, when action was restarted from the low blow, Roman wanted to touch gloves, even though he was angry, and Franco went to throw a strike, and Alcantara threw a bird back. Not much won on the sportsmanship side from Franco. He does get the TKO. It was a needed victory. But the bigger point again, what would you think of a guy just calling it quits right there? And what do we think about that across MMA? I kind of am almost in the belief that if it's a devastating enough eye poke or groin low blow shot, that somehow the fight just needs to be stopped. Because the fighter that's showing the pride, that wants to get back in action, who was fouled, is still hurt, and they're behind the 8 ball getting back in there. It's a touch your way. You can't have a uniform rule across the board because it is a by case scenario. But it was a weird situation that we were exposed to, bringing up questions, bringing up how should these situations be handled at LFA 31. A co-main event, Ian Heinrich finds the win column once again. The Hurricane comes over the top of a lazy jab with a huge right hand, knocking out Brazilian submission artist Daniel Madrid in the second round, almost 4 minutes into it. Heinrich could be next in line for an LFA middleweight title shot. We'll talk about the LFA middleweight title coming up here in just a little bit. The main event from Access TV's LFA 31 with the interim featherweight title on the line. Striker Thon Lee, grappler Bobby Moffitt. We expected that Moffitt would want this fight on the ground. That's what he was trying to do. Lee showed off a great game, kicking with his left leg, the power kicks, counter straight lefts, drops Moffitt early with the left hand in the second round. Early on, Moffitt on the takedown. Lee is sprawled, punching. The ref jumps in. From Thon Lee's opinion, he was sprawling and continually punching. But it did look like that Moffitt was possibly trying to lock up the left arm for some kind of maneuver. Would it have been effective? There was head pressure. He was getting pounded. Moffitt and his team at the lab feel that the stoppage was premature. Thon Lee does not feel the same. We move on because Thon Lee, it looks like, will next take on Kevin Aguilar so that we can see a unification of the LFA featherweight title. A couple other fights that we didn't talk about up at the main card, and you can check out the results at cageminds.com. Saturday, there were two big events. Bellator again, still doing Bellator things that I sometimes don't understand. Before the online prelims got going, which I did tune into, had two screens set up, so it was UFC and Bellator all night long, two TVs, a phone, a tablet. We had it all going so that we could watch all the action. Before the event got started, you had a fight, which I don't understand. How before the online prelims we did have a fight. Jean Paul Lebowski submits Isaiah Culpepper with a armbar. Okay, but then you actually get to what was on, and Joey Davis, a wrestler of high caliber, putting it together, showing the striking, a spinning back kick to the liver, and follow-up punches, taking out Ian Butler. It was great getting to talk to Davis, a 170-pounder with that wrestling foundation, athleticism, putting his striking together, and has a killer instinct. So glad that I got the opportunity last week to talk to Joey Davis, because the sky is the limit. Bright future for that young man. We have 4 fights on the online prelims. Then Bellator went Bellator again, because between the online prelims in the TV main card, you had Johnny Cisneros with a submission victory in the second round. You go up to the main card and in a brawl, and the key was being able to get on top. The improved wrestling that Henry Corrales has gained at the MMA lab, he's able to pull out the decision victory over the former WSOF champion Georgi Karahanian. A huge victory. Then Aaron Pico, the much talked about, much hyped up prospect who had made the move from the American Kickboxing Academy over to the Body Shop, shows off that continual growth. He did hit that wall and get hurt in his first fight, get submitted early, but has bounced back marvelously, and this time taking on a bona fide threat in a Shane Kutchner who had a 12-3 record at 145 pounds. Pico hits that body and hits it hard, mixing up his combinations. A lot of people was like, what? A lot of people are like, wow, that was a nasty one-punch knockout. Well, let me set the record straight. Pico actually hit the body 4 times if you look at it. He kind of hits it with his first left hook to the body, nearly misses. Second one, he gets it pretty good. The third one was the first knockdown that looked like a knockdown kind of trip, and then the vicious finishing left hook to the liver. So 4 in all. Love the combinations, the killer instinct, a tremendous performance for Aaron Pico, who in 37 seconds literally ripped off 6 or 7 5-punch combinations. Michael Chandler is back in the win column. His wrestling prevailed even after eating a question mark kick to the face and grinding out Goichi Yamauchi and really just laying in to the Japanese Brazilian. That wrestling background. Michael Chandler, presumably next for him is Brent Primus and trying to recapture that Bellator lightweight title. We know that there's been flirting ever since Josh Thompson, who was there with Jay Glazer at the booth in the arena talking about the night, but was not in action. We know that there could be Thomas Chandler. Could Chandler move up to 170? A lot of talk there of what's next for the former Bellator lightweight champion. Talking about welterweights. The welterweight title is on the line. And again, what it would come down to is the better wrestling. Rory McDonald able to get the takedowns when he needed it. The first and the second round were big rounds for McDonald to get out to a lead. Lima's leg kicks, piling up on that front left leg of McDonald, would play a huge factor in the third round, where Lima was late in the round able to score a knockdown off a leg kick, jump in a half guard, land some damage, and steal that round on at least 1, maybe 2 of the judges' scorecards. In the fourth round, desperate to get the fight on the ground, McDonald would dive in on a takedown right away, get stuffed, have to try to pull half guard, but Lima would cut through it, take the mount. Unfortunately, Lima would not be able to get a finish, but again, another big round for the champion. Going down to the 5th round, where it was Roy McDonald putting Lima back against the cage, scoring the takedown, landing elbows, cutting up the champion, and taking the unanimous decision. Interesting scorecards. One judge had it 3-2, where McDonald did pull out the win with the first, second, and fifth rounds. Two other judges gave McDonald 4 rounds, and some kind of mix of Lima losing almost every round, going 49-46 and 49-45. The wrestling plays off. Rory McDonald with a messed up left shin. Lima not able to keep the distance with the leg kicks and win the fight where he had McDonald hurt. McDonald gutted through it, got the takedowns, a huge win. Interesting to see where the Red King goes from here, who he'll be facing next. Then we had the start of the heavyweight Grand Prix, where Chael Sonnen gets his takedowns in the first and the second round, is able to control where the fight is taking place, kept Rampage Jackson off balance, and gets a decision win. Was impressed with Chael Sonnen's left hand. He was able to score the over-the-top left hand. Sonnen is a middleweight. Rampage is a light heavyweight. They were fighting up at heavyweight. No doubt about it that Sonnen would not have the power to hurt Rampage. He was landing. He did score a good amount of strikes. In the third round, Rampage would land more of the devastating shots, would put Sonnen against the cage, but Sonnen holding on to Rampage, not allowing himself to be hit with any of the big shots, held on long enough to get the decision win and proceed on to fight the winner of April 28th's Fedor versus Frank Mir bout in Chicago at the Allstate Arena. The former Pride champion versus the former UFC champion. A little bit later in the tooth than we all would have liked, but still something to behold in this heavyweight Grand Prix that Bellator has presented us with. You kind of work with what you have. Big night for Rory McDonald, an assertive night for Michael Chandler, a huge night for Aaron Pico, a great night for Henry Corrales, and Chael Sonnen did what we expected him to do. Also to note, Rampage Sonnen had the gentleman's bet of $10,000 per weigh-in. I said it would just take 3 to win the fight. To my surprise, Rampage did get up from him, but there were still 3, 1 each round. Be interesting to see if Rampage cashes out. Sonnen said he'd just like to have the check, but he promises he won't cash it. He just wants to look at it. That was Saturday night in LA. Across the country, Saturday night in Boston, you did have the UFC in town, and the night got started in a crazy fashion. Islam Makayev with a big left hand knocks out Gleison T about 57 seconds into their fight past prelim. That was kind of shocking. In a very close decision, somewhat controversial, Dustin Ortiz defeats Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja had the back in the first round for most of the round, took that round. In the second round is the grinding wrestling effort and the combination striking of Ortiz that won that round. In the third round, for 3 minutes of the round, it was Pantoja having Ortiz's back, but hunting the submission instead of doing any damage would be costly, as when Ortiz got out of the back mount position, his striking and his pushing for the takedown, but doing it with punches, would steal the round in the last 90 seconds, and Dustin Ortiz gets a big win. Right uppercut, I'm talking about Abdul Razak Al Hassan settling the grudge with Sabah Mahasi. Was it a left hook that dropped Mahasi at UFC 218, or was Mahasi dropping down for an awkward takedown to get out of the way of a left hook? The dispute was settled when Al Hassan landed the big uppercut. You can check it out at my Instagram, at Caged Minds MMA. In another controversial bout, the hometown fighter takes a close decision. It's not the first time you've ever heard that. Kyle Bodniak gets the decision win over Brandon Davis. Davis, I really feel it's one of those cases of you have nobody to blame but yourself. Davis did stalk down Bodniak for most of the fight, but just did not let his hands go enough. He has a devastating right leg, a traditional Thai stance, could put together combinations, was effectively avoiding a lot of the big strikes of Bosniak, but just barely not doing enough. Kyle Bosniak was against the firing squad in this fight, knew if he lost he'd lose his job. He did a good job of pushing for the takedowns and of being active, of throwing the bigger punches. And when we've seen in close fights, that can sway the judges, even though the higher landing percentage was on Davis's side. A close fight, a fun fight. Kyle Bosniak with a close decision win over Brandon Davis. Rob Font with a spectacular performance against Thomas Almeida, kicking his way into the top 10 of the 135-pound division. And it was his right hand stunning Almeida, a follow-up head kick moments later, and then finishing off with ground and pound, including uppercuts. A big win for the Massachusetts native in Boston. The Boston guys performed great in Boston. John Vellante took a split decision win from Francimar Barros, pushing forward, landing big bombs. Barros did a good job of beating up the body, but never landed anything significant. It was Vellante pushing forward, landing big, hard hooks from both sides, taking a decision win. Calvin Kattar and Shane Burgos in the fight of the night went into the boxing range and started just pounding on each other. Burgos was getting eaten up by the Kattar jab, but Burgos was able to answer back with leg kicks, with ripping to the body, both hands, devastating left hook to the body. A back and forth for the first two rounds. Seemed like the first round was Kattar's round. Burgos came back very well in the second. Those combinations to the body, his left hand. But in the third round, Kattar unleashes a overhand right, finds the Burgos temple. Burgos off balance, charges forward, gets hit with an uppercut going, making him straighten up, and then another uppercut hits the deck. Follow-up ground and pound. Calvin Kattar now 19 wins in his MMA career. Nearly 30 fights as a professional. Hands Burgos' first loss. And Kattar will obviously move up in the rankings. Obviously earning a lot of respect in the two fights he's had. Shane Burgos and Andre Fili. Tough test. Kattar proving to Kattar a very smooth striker who shows off the experience of a guy that has nearly 30 fights with his composure and his ability to counter, answer back, and dictate with his jab. The co-main event, the light heavyweight title, was on the line, and after eating a couple big shots from Volkan Ozdemir, Daniel Cormier found his right hand, started landing big shots, and towards the end of the first round, found a single leg, was able to get the takedown, nearly had the back, and nearly had the rear naked choke to end the first round. The path of resistance, of least resistance, was then clear to Cormier in the second round, where Cormier again attacks that single leg, gets Ozdemir down, goes from half guard into the crucifix position, and just pounds away, pop, 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 until the referee jumps in. Daniel Cormier once again cements himself as the UFC light heavyweight champion, and kind of respectfully so, said that he more or less, with the results of what happened with John Jones, felt in his heart that he looked at this fight as a fight for the vacant title, that he wasn't coming in as the champion, that he had to win that belt, that it was vacant. Well, Daniel Cormier is once again the UFC light heavyweight champion. He is obviously the greatest light heavyweight of the USADA era, possibly the greatest light heavyweight of all time. You don't know how a Cormier, most likely a Cormier, Liddell, Cormier, Ortiz fight does not work out well. We've seen the advancements of guys fighting just from training to the techniques to everything. So quite possibly the greatest light heavyweight of all time, Daniel Cormier, and he defends the title once again. Once again, in also beating that Henry Hoof, South Florida-led team, Anthony Johnson, Volkan Ozdemir, the big heavy Dutch-trained strikers have not fared well against the Olympic wrestler. The main event, Stipe Miocic, Francis Ngannou, Could we see a changing the guard in the heavyweight division? No, we do not. Stipe Miocic racks up his third title defense, unprecedented for the UFC. The greatest heavyweight of all time, and the greatest light heavyweight of all time on the same card. I don't know if people really digested that and gave it the respect it deserved. Many people, because of the hype of Francis Ngannou, the prospect, the knockouts, the punching power, I was more impressed with what he did against guys like Curtis Blades and guys like Anthony Hamilton. Look at what he did against very good wrestlers. But when you put everything together, the wrestling, the boxing, the cardio ability, Stipe Miocic excelled. Put together a game plan like a champion would and attacked Ngannou at what presumably would be Ngannou's weakness. The weakness of every guy that we've seen of this Adonis-like body. Those big old muscles need oxygen. You push the pace on them. Miocic did a very good job of attacking the legs and even landing his big overhand right several times. Speed and precision, overpower, incredible head movement, and the ability to take a punch because Ngannou did land. But Miocic ate it, weathered the storm, answered back, and also found the way to take down Ngannou, hitting the single legs as they were explaining. I've heard other people explain the hips and the power when you're trying to take down a opponent from a double leg. You're matching power against power, and you're trying to pull them, and that gives them the power of the center of gravity to open up their hips and push down. In attacking a single leg and moving around, you're attacking their balance, which isn't their power. Ngannou is a power fighter. He got off balance. Once he got tired, later in the fights, we saw that second burst, that dig down deep, that deeper gas tank of Miocic be able to complete the double leg takedowns. But it all came off of first affecting the balance, wearing out the base, the gas tank, and then leaving it to where it was a much easier opponent to deal with. There were tenuous moments in the first round, and then with Ngannou taking off most of the fifth round, he did kind of power up for a big finish, swung hard a couple times, but the champion withstood, and still, that kind of night. I expected DC to retain. I thought it was a coin flip between Ngannou and Miocic. That was foolish of me. I did go with Ngannou, but I had already kind of suspected leading up into the event that I was wrong as I started to contact professional fighters that I knew and ask their opinion of what was going to happen. And everybody that I talked to was going with Miocic, and I forgot the rule that you take the better wrestler. I did that when I picked Chael Sonnen. I did that when I picked Rory McDonald. Did that when I picked Daniel Cormier, but was my own enemy in not picking Stipe Miocic, who, yes, right now is the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. He has earned that with the murderer's row he has went through. He has earned that respect with defending his title 3 times. Again, that is unprecedented. How many heavyweights have defended the title 3 times? Only one, Stipe. Yes, Couture, Sylvia. There are guys that did it twice. Velasquez. We'll get to Kane in a minute. What could have been if Frank Mir would have never been in the motorcycle accident? You always have to ask yourself that in these imaginary conversations. But when you look at the tear that Miocic has been on, the murderer's row that he has fought, talking about what Ngannou did, Dos Santos, Overeem, taking the title from Verdun. Before that, earning the title fight, beating guys like Arlovsky, Hunt, Roy Nelson, Gabriel Gonzaga. Not an easy path to the title. Stipe Miocic has earned this. Now, as we've had in MMA, and we've had it for a long time, there is a lack of depth in the heavyweight divisions. You ask what's next for the champion, we have to bring up the lack of depth because there is no clear-cut number one contender in the heavyweight division. There's obviously an anointed guy, and anointed may be strong verbiage and may sound a little more harsher than what I meant, but if you're looking at the people who are currently in the UFC heavyweight division, the guy who's on the biggest win streak is Alexander Volkov, the former Bellator heavyweight champion, who comes in at an astounding 3-0 so far in the promotion, coming off of wins over Roy Nelson, Timothy Johnson, and Stefan Struve. But that's only 3-0, as to where Ngannou had to get a whopping 6-0 to get this opportunity, not rushing guys. Looking at the heavyweight division, Volkov is only ranked as the number 7 contender. We look at everybody in between there. Derek Lewis is coming off of the loss to Hunt. Hunt has already lost to Miocic and has already lost to Overeem. But Overeem has already lost to Ngannou. Overeem just lost to Ngannou, had already lost to Miocic. Miocic beat Ngannou. Miocic took the title from Verdum, who Verdum is actually back on a win streak, and the former heavyweight champion wants to know what he has to do. Cain Velasquez seems to be the option that the UFC wants to go with. It's the option that UFC Tonight was talking about. It's an option that his best friend Daniel Cormier, that analyst on UFC Tonight and UFC commentator who's impartial, that guy, he's been talking about Cain Velasquez coming back, Cain Velasquez returning to become the world champion in 2018. How can a guy that has not fought since UFC 200, since July of 2016, still be ranked number 4 in the division? That talks to the lack of depth in the division. The last time that Cain Velasquez was in the octagon, Travis Brown was coming off of a win over Josh Barnett before getting pounded out by Cain Velasquez. 3 more losses since that, and presumably now in the WWE Performance Center. Things have changed a lot. And how Brown, on a 4-fight losing streak, is still ranked as number 14 contender in the division, again, talks to the lack of depth, the lack of development that the UFC has put into the heavyweight division. A heavyweight division that traditionally is the trademark of combat sports. The UFC has really been slacking on this division, and here's where we put a magnifying glass to it when we can look at it and say, I believe Stipe Miocic is on the precipice of cleaning out the division. Volkov is on a 3-fight win streak, and that's the best name I can give you. Possibly Curtis Blades right behind him. None of those names get you excited. None of those names have fought the caliber of fighters that Miocic has already beat in asserting himself as one of the best of all time. And why do I say as the best of one of the best of all time? It's because there is that faction, that corner, those people that will argue Fedor Emelianenko, the greatest pride heavyweight of all time. Hard to argue with what Fedor did in his era. Hard to argue with what Miocic is doing in his era, beating who he's presented with. And there's a reason why the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix is half light heavyweights. A lack of sustainable depth in this division. Stipe Miocic, Cain Velasquez. That seems to be the presumable way to go. It just feels a little weird to me to say that we're going to give Cain Velasquez a title shot after a year and a half on the shelf. A year and a half on the shelf, and Conor McGregor, for reals, let's strip him of the title, but let's give Cain Velasquez a title opportunity. Mostly because there's nobody else to do it. But the problem with Cain Velasquez, and the reason why we haven't seen him in a year and a half, is his ability to stay healthy through a training camp, which that's hard to do. Nearly impossible for these athletes to get into the cage at 100%. But Velasquez has had the inability to stay healthy and now we're just going to give him a title shot. I would love to say that he needs to earn it. Have that rematch with Fabricio Verdum, but that brings up again the problem of missing out on the payday of what a big fight it would be, Velasquez Miocic, and can Velasquez sustain the camp, the fight, another camp to then get to Miocic, or do you take advantage of Velasquez is healthy, let's try to make that fight happen with Miocic? It's a weird kind of conundrum where the more logical kind of thing to me is because they're both healthy, it's almost super fight season. The UFC has struggled to make International Fight Week special. Demetrius Johnson is recovering from surgery. He says that he wants to fight TJ Dillashaw at International Fight Week, July 2018. Chris Cyborg said that UFC 226 will be International Fight Week for 2018 and that she has already been handed a contract to fight fellow women's champion Amanda Nunes at that event. So we could have the women's bantamweight and featherweight champions fighting. We could have the men's flyweight and bantamweight champions fighting. Why not go 3 for 3? Why not do Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic on the same card, light heavyweight champion versus heavyweight champion, because both divisions are at a point of standstill that is just kind of drastic. DC, what's he hanging around at 205 for? Looking for one more fight with Alexander Gustafsson. The light heavyweight division is basically in more turmoil and peril than the heavyweight division. Daniel Cormier ran Anthony Johnson into retirement. Glover Teixeira is not performing at that rate to be a true contender, it seems like. Alexander Gustafsson is the last name. Do you wait to have DC Gustafsson and Miocic Velasquez before we talk super fight? But maybe it's time to talk super fight because inability to stay healthy from Gustafsson and Velasquez could dictate that it's super fight season. A couple news and notes from the UFC. The situation with Robert Whittaker that has forced him out of UFC 221 appears to be more severe than just an injury. A staph infection, according to Dana White. A situation to keep monitored on and keep an eye on. Hopefully you can wish for a speedy and safe recovery for Robert Whittaker and that we will be able to see him in the octagon again one day. Talking about the crazy UFC title scene, the UFC did announce over the weekend that a UFC 223 in Brooklyn, Tony Ferguson, Khabib Nurmagomedov has been booked for the 4th time, this time with the lightweight title, undisputed lightweight title of the UFC on the line. Hilariously enough, the UFC reluctantly unwilling to say that they have stripped Conor McGregor of the title. I believe this is a smart move by McGregor to have all of the top contenders take each other out before he comes back so that he only has one big fight ahead of him to be able to say that he has once again cleaned out a division. Smart businessman, not really a defending champion. Defender vacate, I like it. Really, let's be honest, Conor is stripped. The winner of this fight, though, will most likely be fighting Conor in what the UFC will be calling that person's first title defense, and Conor will be calling his first title defense in a fun little mockery of what the system is, or whatever they built into it from challengers to champions. More titles on the line this weekend. LFA has kicked off the year with 3 weeks in a row of fights, and this is going to be week number 3 there in Lake Charles, Louisiana. LFA 32. The vacant light heavyweight title up for grabs. Ryan Spann against UFC vet Alex Nicholson. Nicholson has went up to heavyweight and light heavyweight, fighting on the regional scene since fighting at middleweight in the UFC, getting bounced from the UFC, coming off a knockout win. Ryan Spann, who has fought down at middleweight, now up at a much more natural, also light heavyweight, has had 2 vicious performances, a submission victory, and a big knockout in the LFA cage since asserting himself back at 205. This one is going to end quickly and violently. Normally we're able to get Ryan on for the show. He declined the request. That's all good. focused in for this one. Expect something special in that LFA co-main event. The main event, the middleweight title is vacant and on the line. Brendan Allen, who was involved in that first slobber knocker for the inaugural LFA middleweight title, is back once again. The kid can strike. He can scramble. He's going to be taking on undefeated Anthony Hernandez. This is going to be my first time getting to take a look at him, but has came up through the GKO promotion. Had very fluent running promotion. They do test their guys. Hernandez, all 5 of his win stoppages, 4 submissions, and he has not had walkovers. So far, his opponents have accumulated a 30 victories and 20 losses is his opponent's against record. So he has had veteran competition and getting this big opportunity in the LFA. Also to be featured on the card, Big Show vet Carlo Prater will be taking on Eric Scollin, and heavyweight prospect Juan Adams is in action. Friday night, LFA on Access TV or Lake Charles, Louisiana, if you want to be out there live. The Paramount Network has their second installment of Bellator 193 from the Pechanga Resort in Temecula, California. Welterweight main event, Lorenz Larkin, highly touted free agent who hasn't been able to get going so far inside the Bellator cage, taking on Fernando Gonzalez. Gonzalez, a member of Team Quest, is a brawler. Larkin from Millennia MMA will be the much more technical, much more fluent striker. He's going to have a brawler coming at him to be in his face. There's a potential for Larkin to find his knockout. This would be devastating to go 0-3 in his first 3 fights in Bellator. Gonzalez has been the upset king, though, since being in Bellator, taking out the guys that they thought would beat him. Co-main event, Kendall Grove taking on AJ Matthews. Grove, big, long, starting to learn how to use his frame after many years in MMA, being able to work that jab, tremendous submission game. AJ Matthews is going to want to keep this one standing up and brawling like he always likes. Another feature fight in the lightweight division on that main card, Syed Awad, heavy hitting, great submission game. Another Millennia MMA representative is going to be taking on JJ Ambrose. Ambrose has popped back into Bellator 3 times, is 1-2 in those 3 stints, has been a part of a lightweight tournament before, trains in Thailand, a Muay Thai specialist who actually has 18 wins by submission, hurts you on the feet and then finishes you on the ground. An interesting one there at 155 pounds. Former RFA featherweight champion Justin Lawrence looks to get back on track in the prelims, and one of the Fab Five, one of those Fab Five wrestling prospects we had talked about recently. We had talked to Joey Davis. We've talked about Aaron Pico. Terrell Fortune now is going to be back in the Bellator cage. The heavyweight is 3-0. Looks to go for another big win, taking on a 3-2 Joe Hernandez. That is Friday night. Bellator, Bellator.com, or Bellator.com for the prelims, and then your Paramount main card. Saturday, you have UFC action, UFC on Fox 27. These UFC on Fox cards, remember, they started out with Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos. We've seen world title fights. These cards were prestigious. These cards were a mark your calendar kind of card, and I don't know if this card really takes the cake in that same essence. A great main event, though, I feel. The winner of this fight could very likely, depending on how that staph infection goes with Robert Whittaker, the winner of this fight very likely could be fighting the winner of Rockhold Romero. We're talking about the middleweight main event, Jacare Souza versus Derek Brunson. This is going to be the second time these two tango. Jacare is ranked number 3. Brunson is ranked number 8. Brunson is the hometown favorite in this fight as they fight in North Carolina. Souza on the betting line comes in as a slight favorite at minus 150. Your comeback on Brunson is plus 135. You also have big betting favorite, the biggest betting favorite on the card, on the main card, Gregor Gillespie taking on Jordan Rinaldi. 3-0, Gillespie getting an opportunity to shine. Gillespie, I think, a smaller lightweight, going to look to use his footwork and his striking. Rinaldi's going to look to drag this fight to the ground. Moving up from lightweight to welterweight on this main card, Drew Dober is going to bang it out with Frank Camacho. I love these fights. They are hardcore fights, but those two fights that are opening up the main card, it's not the names that you normally expect the UFC to be trying to promote. Skipped over the co-main event, but that's in the featherweight division. Andre Touchy-Feely taking on Dennis Bermudez. That's an interesting one as the striking game is starting to come together of Feely, but his wrestling will be tested against Bermudez, who Bermudez has a solid wrestling game, has a solid striking game, but seems to have defensive lapses, gets caught, can get hurt, get overexcited, and end up losing a fight or getting submitted and getting overzealous. Interesting stuff there in the main card, and like I said, it is a rematch in the main event. Jacare Souza is up there with Damian Maia for who is the most vicious Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu submission artist that we have in MMA. These two guys are, again, no strangers to each other, but it was back a while ago. It was all the way back in August of 2010 when Jacare scored a 41-second knockout of Derek Brunson. Since that time, Jacare has only tasted defeat twice. That was to Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker. It has been such a run that I believe it's 8-2 for Jacare since these two last fought. Success has also, though, been greatly found by Derek Brunson since that fight. Brunson loses to Souza, but since then has picked up 9 wins, 3 losses, losing, yes, to the same gentlemen, Romero and Robert Whittaker, putting behind a bad decision loss last February against Anderson Silva to knock out Daniel Kelly and Lyoto Machida in his last 2 fights. You have to worry about the early power of Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson with 2, 3 is a finishing machine. 11 knockouts, 3 submissions, 14 finishes out of 18 victories, and 13 wins coming in the first round. The man gets in there to get things done. Too respectful, too reserved against Anderson Silva, back to his aggressive ways. What kind of game plan does Brunson come out against a Jacare Souza who was able to hurt him and knock him out? Coming off of a loss last April, having to recover from elbow surgery, the TKO loss to Robert Whittaker, which stopped the 2-fight win streak. Jacare also a finishing machine. 24 wins, 20 finishes, 6 knockouts, 14 submissions. His last 3 wins have all came in the first round. Jacare does not waste time either inside of the octagon. This fight is going to be explosive. A very good main event. 2 fights to spotlight on the FS1 prelims. The feature FS1 prelim, Eric Koch, Bobby Green, has Fight of the Night written all over it. Same reach, same size, same build. Eric Newbreed Koch has been training for a long time out at the Rufus Sport Academy. Strong kicks, good hands, and underrated grappling ability with some submission savvy. Taking on Green, a wealth of experience. This will be his 33rd MMA fight. A smooth striker who likes his boxing, hard kicks, underrated grappling as we saw against Landa Venata, and a motivated, confident Bobby Green with his swag puts on a show. Also want to spotlight that number 15, Mirsad Bektic, will be returning to action. The Bosnian, for the first time since being on the wrong side of the comeback of the year victory by Darren Elkins. Look for a heavy dose of ground and pound as he takes on exciting Brazilian Godofredo Pepe. Pepe, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. The grappling is strong. He likes to use his Muay Thai while standing. A little bit reckless. Look for a fun fight there, but the takedowns and the grounding pound of Beptic is something to definitely keep an eye on. Spotlight a fight on the UFC Fight Pass early prelims, and you have to spotlight Austin Arnett, the Dana White Contenders Series decision loss to Brandon Davis, but such a spectacular performance. They're bringing him back on less than a week's notice, actually, to get this octagon opportunity against Corey Sandhagen, the Colorado Dwayne Ludwig trained striker who's coming off of the TKO win, as we had mentioned, at LFA 31. Crisp boxing, good knees, but does he have the experience with only 7 fights under his belt to take on Arnett? But Sandhagen has trained with the likes of TJ Dillashaw. UFC on Fox 27. Not as spectacular, not as heralded as some of these Fox cards, but we've seen a lot of times these fight night cards that are unheralded produce some big finishes. On the local scene, this Saturday night, we got 2 events. Buffalo Thunder hosts Holmes Boxing Cold War 4, where the main event has Gene Pettis against Antonio Tom Martinez. Caged Minds 2017 Boxer of the Year, Jose Osorio takes on Derek Pettis. You also have a couple ladies bouts with Leanne Martinez versus Cristina Montano and Jordan Garcia against Kira Mendoza. Not to mention Bryant McLean against Travis Foster. That is up at Buffalo Thunder. I will be in Albuquerque locally and live at the Embassy Suites, King of the Cage Horizon, a night of pro and amateur MMA. Join me there or check out Caged Minds MMA on Twitter for your updates. I'll be out there tweeting about the event. One more time, a thank you and a shout out for the support to Mac10 MMA CK10. Check them out on Facebook. Caged Minds MMA on Twitter and Instagram. Caged Minds Combat Sports News. It's how to follow us across social media. Keep checking out cagedminds.com and go check out our recent interview with undefeated professional boxer Angelo Leo, who will be in action on the Mayweather Promotions card this Saturday night if boxing is your thing. Once again, thanks for listening.